Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. We've got a great topic for you today, so let's go for a ride. What is the scariest rural place in the US or Canada for your car to break down? Please remember to like, share, tell us from around the world, and subscribe. Wyoming. It's a really cool place, but there's just nothing there. You might as well break down on another planet when it comes to some stretches on the interstate, let alone smaller roads. My car broke down in rural Nunavut. I'm lucky I had an emergency kit on me. Nothing like sitting for 3 hours while it's minus 40 Celsius and no heat. A number of years ago, I drove along the Texas-Mexico border and went through a little border town on the US side. A buddy of mine was with me, and as soon as we pulled into town, we both looked at each other and said, "What the F is wrong with this place?" But I was almost out of gas, so I stopped to fill up. Went inside to pay. Standing in line, 10-year-old buying a candy bar in front of me. I suddenly realized that the magazine stand in front of me is completely filled with anime porn. I still don't know. They look like comic books, but the cover of the one that I happened to be looking at was a pussy. A very artfully drawn anime P, but a P nonetheless, with a 10-year-old standing in front of me buying a candy bar. Okay, this is weird, but whatever. 10-year-old pays for the candy bar and exits. Guy behind the counter says, "Can you hang on for a moment?" Sure, whatever. I look at the counter. The magazine on the counter seems to be a special effects magazine of some kind. It's showcasing what appears to be a severed human head lying on the sand of a beach somewhere. Me still not figuring this out somehow. This is an interesting magazine. What's the back cover? The back cover would appear to be a car interior with a dead body and a bunch of blood and material everywhere. Oh, this is a magazine of crime scenes, death porn, at the local gas station. So we left. Pretty sure the next car found themselves in the middle of a Stephen King novel. For me, it was West Texas. No idea about the people, but it was unnerving. I drove through it at midday or night. No cell phone signal, no radio, no power lines, hot as hell. At night, you could see occasional flashes of light in the distance of one of those fuel things that spits out fire out of the top. Then, every once in a while, there would be this random small house or run-down looking trailer out in the middle of a good 10 to 30 minute drive from the road. I always wondered what their story is. Cut off from the world in the middle of a desert, though I do not dare to find out, lol. Driving through the desert in the US, when they say last gas 200 miles, oh, they mean it. If you broke down along one of those stretches, man, that might not work out so good. Coming from somebody who's driven cross-country a couple of times, from Washington State to New York, I can tell you that, yeah, when you see a sign that says that, they're not joking. I'd say between Thunder Bay and Winnipeg, there's like F all between those two places, and I once saw a giant white wolf here. It was cool, but I wouldn't want to break down there. Driving anywhere on a desert highway with no nearby urbanism. My aunt was driving with her cousin and aunt in rural Arizona once at night, and they had to stop the car because 3 figures in black and green clothing and hoods on were crossing the road sideways, facing their car. I remember staying at my uncle's house during the time of their day trip and then coming back absolutely petrified. About 30 years ago, wife and I stopped to pee in the parking lot of an abandoned restaurant in the middle of the night in the Pine Barrens. I don't know if scary is the correct word. Definitely creepy. I have driven through Nevada before, and 99.9% of it is just empty desert with nothing for 100 miles except for a high-security prison. So if you get stranded, thirst would be the most likely to kill you. There aren't even cacti. Death Valley at noon. It was 130 degrees Fahrenheit there recently. Edit. Actually happened to me while driving a 1977 Dodge Conversion camper RV in 2001. Engine overheated on a 108-degree day. Had to pull over for an hour and let it cool down, then drove 25 miles per hour to the next little gas station where we could get coolant. That was a pretty scary moment. Rural southeast Oklahoma. I have lived in some places, but the experience of meth users on the Arkansas-Oklahoma border in the middle of nowhere, that was effing terrifying. I witnessed a man in overalls, no shirt, dive out of a ditch on the side of the road, roll across the gravel road into the other ditch, and then just stare at me while I waited. There was an entire family that just disappeared, like man, woman, child, dog, gone into a rural area, and not uninhabited or super wild, just rural. No thank you. I've seen Wrong Turn and Texas Chainsaw. I'm good. I drove an old truck, just rebuilt the transmission, from Fairbanks to the lower 48 back in early April of this year. I brought 4 bins of parts, oils, and tools with me because I was absolutely terrified of breaking down. There are parts of the upper Yukon that are hours away from the nearest gas station, let alone the nearest hospital. It was minus 10 degrees Fahrenheit when I started, and I had my contingency sack with cold weather gear readily available. I also brought a minus 30 degree Fahrenheit sleeping sack and a propane heater. I tried to prepare for a breakdown as much as possible, but I knew that if I were to wreck, I would most likely die. If I slid off the road or I'd hit a moose, I would die. I couldn't count on anyone to be there to rescue me or perform life-saving aid but myself. So I would agree with an earlier comment in the fact that some parts of some desolate, you have no hope of survival other than yourself. You can plan for it as much as you'd like, but when it's out of your hands, you're essentially leaving it up to luck. US 14 between Huron and Pierre, South Dakota, especially in the winter. Dark, narrow 2-lane road with mostly no highway divide, almost no towns or people and very few gas stations. Remember the highway scene in Fargo, where the family in the station wagon drives by after the cop gets killed? It's like that. Also, McDonald passed in western Montana, pretty much impassable in winter and often closed, so if you break down, there's a good chance you'll freeze out there. It used to be in Montana, the highway department would put up a reflective cross wherever someone got killed on a road. Driving up that mountain pass and seeing those damn things will creep you out. Montana is one of the most beautiful places that I've been able to drive through, but you absolutely feel the remoteness too when you're there. I'd recommend it, but have a plan. Dempster Highway in Canada is by far the worst. It's the road that connects Whitehorse to Inuvik. It's a gravel road that is 742 kilometers, 461 miles long, and stretches from the subarctic to the Arctic. There's only 1 or 2 villages that the highway runs through. If the severe cold doesn't kill you in the winter, the wildlife certainly would. You're also far from any phone towers. Very far. Pretty much anywhere more than a 2-hour drive from a major city in January. A lot of people don't know it, but having a winter survival kit in your car can easily save your life. There are a lot of rural roads with no cell service and little to no traffic, especially at night. Always have a way to keep yourself warm, stowed in your car. It's not a long distance, but the Senni stretch in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. It's a perfectly straight stretch of 25 miles through a national wildlife refuge, and there is nothing on the road between the unincorporated towns of Senni and Shingleton. Tourists have died in Death Valley. It's in the name, and yet they do. Beyond nature, I'm not sure. I think in the past, when marijuana was still illegal in California, there were plenty of no-go areas in the North Woods. But you didn't need to break down to have life-threatening issues. Just take the wrong road. We were stationed in northern Montana, 10 miles from the Canadian border, and a 40-mile trip to the nearest town. My car broke down on a dirt road 10 miles from the Air Force site. I sat there, wondering what to do. No cell phones then. When a truck came by, a man got out to help me. Turned out, he was from my hometown in Ohio. I mean, what are the odds of that happening? It was crazy. Broke down in 30 below zero weather, same area while pregnant. Got out and started walking to the only cattle barn I could see. I was bundled up in my husband's work coveralls that I found in the trunk. Thankfully, a farmer drove by. These are sparsely traveled roads. I always considered it a miracle, both times. I used to be a dispatcher for AAA roadside assistance. There's a little series of islands or marsh in a very southern Louisiana called Grand Isle or Island, I forget. Whenever a call came in from someone down there, not only would it take us several hours to find a contractor willing to go help someone down there, but when we did, they would quote no less than 3 or 4 hours themselves. So basically, an all-day wait for something as small as a flat tire or locking your keys in your car. The most isolated I've ever felt was on the Alaska Highway, about 100 miles east of the AL-CAN border. I was praying I didn't break down. In my mind, the danger was from the animals I might make contact with, and the fact that the weather can change from decent to brutal very fast. The fact I was riding my motorcycle from Ohio to Fairbanks made my super alert to my surroundings and everything that could go wrong. The eastern San Luis Valley in Colorado, especially around Mount Bianca, up to the Great Sand Dunes National Monument, creepy as F. Strange lights at night, numerous cattle mutilations, just high weirdness, and feeling watched the whole time I was there. I wanted to climb up the sand dunes, but got there on a cold February, middle of the night. Tried to sleep in the parking lot so I could climb up and take pictures of the sunrise on the dunes. Felt creeped out in the pale light of the parking lot all alone. I found out about the stories about the mutilations and UFOs only after I visited and searched for why it felt so creepy. Trio of cities in northeast Florida, sure. Lake Butler, Stark, and Rayford. Those tri-towns are where the major state prisons and execution chamber is in Florida, and the bulk of their economy depends on the prison system, and it reflects deeply in their culture. It's very racist, backwoods, and rednecky. It is a place you do not want to be if you're not from around there. I mean, you had me at Florida, but that being said, that sounds even more Florida than Florida, so careful out there. If you meant scary rural as in no help for miles, then the desert in Nebraska. I mean, even when you see ads for phone coverage, Nebraska always has the least amount of coverage. Barely anyone lives there. It's just nothingness, just a desert. There isn't a whole lot of water in the desert there either. You can't go more than 2 days or so without water, and without help from miles, you could easily die. If you were looking for scary rural as in you don't want to find help, then Muskegon Heights in Michigan. I think it may have made it on the list of worst places to live in the US, but I could be wrong about that. It has some of the highest crime rates and lots of drug users. Michigan is shitty as it, but Muskegon Heights makes it shittier. Both are scary, and wouldn't want to break down in either one. There's a road near where I live called Holland Road, which is nicknamed Pigman Road. Reason it's called that is because of a legend where a guy stuck pig heads on a pike in his property to keep people away, but some teens made fun of him, and he killed them and placed their heads on pikes in his property as a warning. It's not really haunted, but I wouldn't want to be stuck with a dead car there. The only place I can think of is where I used to live for some time. It was next to a smallish town, and next to the town was a small city, maybe 15 to 20 minutes away from where I lived. Therefore, the road was an actual road, not gravel. There were very little houses, and the road was basically at least 3 miles of a skinny road with forests on each side. It was basically the most hillbilly redneck thing you could think of. All of the driveways were made of gravel or dirt, and a good amount of houses had Confederate flags. If your car broke down there, you were screwed, to be honest. Even I got scared sometimes coming home at night. If the cliche forest killer didn't get you, the coyotes and bears probably would. Or the rednecks.